Hello and welcome to BSB Must Reads, where we share with you all the books we think you must be reading this month. And today I have with me the lovely Missouri Vaun. Hi, Missouri.
Hello.
And you are here to talk about the novella collection that you wrote with Morgan Lee Miller and Nell Stark, The Lonely Hearts Rescue.
That's the one.
That's it. Great cover. I love that cover. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this collection and your story? And I would love to hear you read.
Well, thank you for hosting this. Yeah, it was, sometimes uh, calls for anthologies go out and you don't automatically think you could, like, that doesn't really like resonate with you or whatever. But the minute you said, would you like to work on a story about shelters, about shelter pets with Nell and Morgan, I was like, yeah, I'm totally in because I have a shelter pet and I have a lot of shelter experience and I just love dogs. And I was like, it seemed like a great fit. So that's kind of how it happened. So I am going to read an excerpt from this book where the two main characters bump into each other. Rebecca Hawks is a event planner, marketing person, and she's trying to help the shelter raise money. And she's just finishing up a meeting where they're going to talk about this big fundraiser they're going to do. Rebecca says, I know there's a sense of urgency about raising some funds. She took a deep breath. I think we could pull this off in 2 weeks if we start promoting it now, like today. Scott's going to help me by reaching out to all his contacts. That will definitely jumpstart our list of stars. She paused. If we're all in agreement, then I'll follow up with the vendors today and get everything delivered. Derek, can I make you the primary contact for this since I'm not sure where these little houses should live until the event? They're ordering dog houses. Sure, that works for me. I'm sorry to interrupt. Carrie stuck her head in the door as she knocked. There's a problem with the cat playroom. Derek, can you come right away? Sure, he was already on his feet. Rebecca filed out of the room with Avery as Maggie headed back to her office. Maggie stopped before she reached her door and waved goodbye. Maggie's the shelter director. Avery and Rebecca rounded the corner from the hallway and turned toward the reception area. There seemed to be some sort of crisis at the front desk. A woman was in tears with a tiny dog in her arms. Carrie was trying to comfort her. I'm so sorry. But don't worry, okay? What's going on? Asked Avery. I had to bring him back. My landlord said absolutely no dogs after he'd agreed to let me take him. The woman sniffed. I feel so bad about this. I agreed to foster him and now I can't. I feel terrible. Sometimes this happens, and it sounds like this was out of your control. Avery took the leash as the woman set the dog she'd been cradling onto the floor. She nodded and wiped at tears as she turned to leave. She looked back once as she trudged toward the door, and then she was gone. This was such a sad scene to witness. Rebecca felt bad for both the young woman and the dog. Well, what happens now? She bent to pet the adorable buff-colored dachshund. He had long, silky hair, and the tag on his collar told her his name was Cotton. Well, he was one of the dogs we'd placed in a foster home while he waits for adoption into a more permanent situation, Avery explained. With the most recent hurricane, we've literally run out of space, so we've had to place a few animals in foster care outside the shelter. Have you ever fostered a dog, Rebecca? He seems to really like you. Carrie rested her elbows on the counter as she smiled down at her. Me? No. Rebecca stood quickly. She didn't want to give the impression that she was a dog person, which she wasn't, was she? If you could take him, that would be amazing. Avery seemed to like the idea right away, even though Rebecca was pretty sure she hadn't agreed to anything. Cotton looked up at her with those big, soulful eyes. Were those tears? Could dogs cry? I suppose I could help out as a temporary solution. She couldn't believe she was considering this, but Avery and Carrie seemed so hopeful. Rebecca really hated to disappoint people. Plus, Cotton was seriously tugging at her heartstrings. How could she run a benefit for the shelter if she wasn't personally willing to at least foster one tiny little dog? I mean, how much trouble could he be? Maybe small dogs were more like cats. Rebecca had a fleeting thought that possibly Cotton even knew how to use a litter box. I mean, she didn't actually have a litter box, but she could certainly get one. That's great news. Let me get one of the adoption coordinators and she can help you fill out the paperwork. Avery reached across the counter for the phone and hit one of the internal extensions. Ashley, can you the front desk? We need to get a new foster mom set up right away. Avery hung up and smiled. Ashley's our adoption coordinator. She'll be right here to assist you and Cotton. Rebecca had a sudden scared feeling that she had no idea what she was getting into. An hour later, she was waddling toward her car with Cotton on a leash and an armload of supplies, a dog bed, food, little green poop bags that she hoped she'd never have to use in public. Who knew fostering a dog was so complicated? She felt like she just filled out more paperwork than she'd had to do for her mortgage. Okay, that was a bit of an exaggeration, but still, in the interview, Ashley had asked about her house, her lifestyle, her work schedule, her family situation, and potential pitfalls. Rebecca was beginning to feel like she was signing up for a dating service rather than as a dog sitter. She had almost reached her car and was doing some mental gymnastics to figure out how she was possibly going to manage to get her keys out of her bag while juggling everything else. She couldn't even see her purse for the plush dog bed she was hugging. She half spun in an attempt to reach for her keys and probably looked like a dog chasing her tail. The more she stretched for her keys, the farther they seemed to move away from her. Cotton jerked the leash, heading in the opposite direction of her spin. She'd purchased one of those retractable leashes and now realized that had been a terrible miscalculation. The extremely good looking dog trainer she'd met the previous day, Rory, appeared in her line of sight at the same moment that Cotton circled Rory's legs and doubled back. Rory became entwined with the leash, which also tightened around Rebecca's legs. At about the same moment, she toppled into Rory, dog bed and all.
Oh, well, that's a meet cute.
There had to be a dog leash involved at least one meetup scene. That's
Of
what I
course,
thought.
of course. I feel like Rebecca doesn't quite know what she's in for with this whole pet.
No, so the inspiration for this was my wife is not a dog person. My wife is a cat person, and all the funny things that she thought about dogs when she first started to live with dogs was hilarious. So I kind of modeled Rebecca's whole worldview of dogs after Evelyn, which was super funny.
That's great. That's
Anyway,
great. Um,
truth
so
and fiction.
yeah, for sure. So this is a collection that you wrote with two other authors, and it's set in the same place. There's only one rescue center, and all three of you draw from that in your stories. What was it like working with two other authors on this concept? I know that you've worked with some of our other authors before on something else. Do you like working in a team? Did you enjoy it? How did it go?
It went really well. I was actually thinking, I was reflecting back and thinking how great it was to work with two other authors who are super organized. Like, I mean, Nell is a teacher, and so she was really buttoned up about like sharing documents and sharing notes, and um, yeah, it went really smoothly. I think the hardest part was initially just figuring out time, place, and sort of basically building the world that all these characters were going to exist in, because we were each going to write a story that had to happen in the same world. Hopefully my internet didn't break up while I was talking about that, but once
Good.
the world building was done, then we each sort of picked a thread, because we knew we wanted to do like a disaster situation, because shelters always are, they're one of the first responders in any sort of uh, weather disaster, whether it's a flood or a fire or a hurricane or whatever. And so with hurricane season approaching, that was kind of where we decided to land with it. But it was a great experience co-writing with them.
Cool. All right. I'm gonna put you on the hook for the next one. Um, so I get the impression that the adorable dog in this story, Cotton, misbehaves a little bit. And Rebecca has to hire a dog trainer to help her out. And so my question is, did you draw from your own experience with your pets when imbuing kind of Cotton with these traits?
Well, definitely, I definitely was drawing on Evelyn's experiences, because we have a dachshund, and dachshunds, if you know them, are notoriously stubborn. And so she hired a dog trainer to help with our dachshund, and it was hilarious, and it didn't go so well. And in the end, the dachshund wins. The dachshunds always win. That's what happens. But I think what's great about pets is, it was funny that you always feel like maybe your pets sort of push your buttons or sort of help you see traits in yourself that maybe you don't notice, right? So I think throughout the story, the relationship between Rebecca and the dog trainer, it reveals things about each of the characters, each of the two human characters anyway. I think the dog pretty much knows himself. But
Sure.
anyway, yeah, at one point she's like, who's training who here, kind of thing, right? Because Rebecca's very headstrong and doesn't want to change her life for this new creature that's living in her house and sort of turning her world upside down. And anyway, presented some fun challenges for her in her relationships.
Awesome. I love it. There's almost two love stories in there, one with the dog and one
Yes.
with the love interest.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So tell us about the romance. You've got Rebecca and you've got Rory, and they've just crashed into each other. Tell us why are they perfect for each other? Why are we going to root for these two to end up together?
Well, I mean, I always think that like really opposite characters draw something out of each other, right? So Rebecca is very like sort of driven, and she doesn't slow down, and she's a perfectionist. Rory's more of, she's like a poet at heart. She like works with her dogs, her animals, like the animals that she trains with, she works with their personalities. She doesn't try to control them, and she's trying to share her worldview with Rebecca. And I think what happens is they sort of drive each other a little crazy at first, but then as time goes on, they each benefit from the lens the other character holds up to them, sort of, if that makes sense. And yeah, it ends up being really a sweet romance, I think. But definitely Cotton is the character that brings them together. So
Yeah, for sure. As it should be in a book called The Lonely Hearts Rescue, right?
yeah.
But that's awesome. And I think that's so true that sometimes in relationships, the other person helps us to learn and grow and change and know more about ourselves than we would have otherwise. So awesome. Please do check out the Lonely Hearts Rescue novella series by Missouri Vaun, Morgan Lee Miller, and Nell Stark, out October 1st on the Bold Strokes web store and October 11 everywhere books are sold. And thank you so much, Missouri.
Thank you, Sandy. It was great seeing you.